tonight on NEWSCENTER. Good news from the nation's job market. More Koreans found jobs last month than any other month in the June to October period. We have the figures. Korea and Japan hold the first post-summit talks over the decades-old issue of Tokyo's wartime sex slavery system. Did we see any major breakthroughs? Our correspondent is live in the studio. And a moment of silence in 21 countries around the world to remember those who fought and died for this country. It's Wednesday, November 11, 2015. Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to those around the world. I'm Moon Conn-young. One good news, one bad. First, the good. Floor leaders of the rival political parties in this country have agreed to open the full session of parliament tomorrow. The National Assembly had been stalled last week as the main opposition refused to take part in any parliamentary activity in protest over the government's decision to reintroduce state-authored history textbooks. Now, that's the good news. And the other, despite another round of talks over how to redraw the country's electoral map ahead of general elections set for April next year, the rival parties failed to find middle ground for the second straight day. Arirang News parliamentary correspondent Park Ji-won has our top story this evening.
4 representatives, each from the ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, including both party leaders, attempt to reach agreement over the redrawing of constituencies. But Wednesday's talks that continued for 3 hours failed to find a solution.
Wednesday's talks are over. Since we haven't reached an agreement, we will meet again at noon Thursday. Aside from that, we cannot talk about it anymore.
This issue has to be resolved somehow, so we will put our best efforts to come to an agreement.
The legal deadline for submitting the revised constituency plan to Parliament is this Friday, 5 months ahead of the elections in April next year. The ruling Saenuri Party wants to maintain the 300-seat parliament by increasing the number of local constituencies while reducing the current 54 proportional representation seats. The party believes that by reducing the number of proportional representatives, it can make room for more rural constituencies without increasing the number of seats within the National Assembly. But the NPAD opposes the plan, saying it will fixate regionalism in Korean politics. The Liberal Party wants to maintain the number of seats given to proportional representation members, and they want to introduce region-based proportional representation members who are chosen based on the total number of votes each party gets in each region. The Constitutional Court ruled late last year that the constituencies be redrawn to realize a more equal and fair representation of the population in each district. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Less than 2 months until 2015 is up. It's now becoming clearer that Korea will most likely not reach its annual trade target of $1 trillion. Our Kwon So-ah shows us some of the government measures to get the country's once main growth engine exports back on track.
Something has to be done about Korea's sluggish exports. That's been constantly reiterated by the government and economists throughout the year. Now, given the serious situation, Korea's Trade Ministry and 10 other government bodies put their heads together to discuss ways to get slowing exports back on track. In a joint meeting Wednesday, officials agreed to give administrative support to sectors with the greatest export potential. These include OLED products, new drugs, and cosmetics, all of which posted visible increases in shipments in the first 9 months of the year compared to the previous year and have not been influenced by the overall decline in exports. In particular, there are high expectations for the OLED industry as its market share accounts for almost half of that of the entire world, performing much better than China at number 2 and the Netherlands at number 3. The officials also agreed to create a 5-year plan to produce high-quality global consumer goods, including Korea's traditional ginseng chicken soup, samgyetang, and promote stronger sales to China. The export of samgyetang had been recently agreed to by President Park Geun-hye and Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. During Wednesday's briefing, Trade Minister Yoon Sang-jik emphasized the importance of various free trade agreements expected to soon come into effect.
If the Korea-China FTA ratification gets delayed further, it's been estimated that we'll have a loss of some $4 billion a day. In other words, a quick ratification will give us that much of profits.
Ratification of 3 bilateral FTAs with China, Vietnam, and New Zealand is pending and will hopefully be concluded ideally this year. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
The nation's October job numbers are out and it's looking good. Backed by an increase in domestic demand, the number of new jobs added in Korea hit a 5-month high in October. But whether that number of quality jobs are on the rise is still questionable. Our Hwang Ji-hye looks into the matter.
The number of new jobs added in Korea has hit the highest in 5 months. Statistics Korea data show that the total number of employed stood at over 26 million in October, up 348,000 from a year earlier. While the overall jobless rate dropped to 3.1%, that for the younger generation, which has long been a source of concern to economic policymakers, was also down to 7.4%, marking the lowest level in almost 2.5 years.
Jobless rate among those aged 15 to 29 dropped because of the number of employed in the age group soared. Among the 101,000 that got newly employed from a year earlier, 95,000 were in their 20s.
The overall improvement in the jobs data comes on the back of the Korean economy gaining momentum recently, thanks to government measures to boost domestic demand. The economy grew 1.2% in the July to September period from the previous quarter, beating market forecasts and posting the strongest quarterly growth since 2010. But experts say more employment does not necessarily mean the quality of jobs are also on the rise. In fact, job growth in the manual labor sector, where people earn money by cleaning or delivering, which are mostly part-time jobs, stood at the highest compared to other sectors.
We have to look at the overall situation when we analyze the current job market. It's because a rise in number of employed is not leading to a rise in household income these days.
Experts add that such positive momentum in the job market is unlikely to become a longer-term trend when Korea's exports continue to drop due to slowing global demand, especially from China. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
A moment of silence was observed in 21 nations around the world to remember those who fought and died during the Korean War on this Wednesday. And at the center of this memorial was a commemorative ceremony in Korea's southern port city of Busan. Arirang News' Connie Kim joins us from the UN cemetery there. Connie.
Well, Conn-young, at 11 a.m. local time, 21 UN member nations observed a minute of silence to honor the brave soldiers who lay in the UN Memorial Cemetery in Busan. Now, this year's event was more significant as the South Korean government held for the first time a burial ceremony for a British Korean War veteran who hoped to be laid to rest alongside his compatriots at the UN cemetery. 14 years ago, British Korean War veteran Robert McCutter passed away, and it wasn't until this moment that his last wish was fulfilled to be buried with his fellow soldiers in the soil he fought for. McCutter spent 2 years fighting in the Korean War and always wished to revisit South Korea while he was still alive. Unfortunately, due to ill health, that didn't happen. Even following his death, it has taken some time for him to return. War veterans who died after the end of the Korean War were not permitted to be buried at the UN Memorial Cemetery, but the policy changed this year, allowing McCutter to be buried here.
It's been a long time in coming to get to this situation, and I never thought it would happen. And I can't thank the people who have made it possible enough for the help and the way and the respect in which the people of South Korea.
For other Korean War veterans from UN member nations, the burial ceremony was an opportunity to see a fellow soldier laid to rest. This is where 2,300 soldiers from 11 UN member nations now lie at rest in peace.
It gives you a feeling, it gives you a closure. You know that they are put to rest and they have gone to our Savior up in heaven.
November 11th is a day World War I ended and serves as a special day, Remembrance Day and Veterans Day for nations around the world, as well as here in the port city of Busan. Some 90 Korean War veterans from UN member nations were invited for the Turn Toward Busan ceremony. At 11 a.m. local time, locals and representatives from 21 UN member nations, including the US, Canada, and Australia, held a minute's silence honoring those soldiers who fell during the conflict. Gratitude and respect were expressed by the Korean War veterans, citizens, and civic groups as they undertook a 3.3-kilometer parade through the port city to remember their efforts and sacrifice in protecting the country. It was the first time for Korean War veterans from the UN member nations to participate in the Turn Toward Busan ceremony since it began in 2007. Now, it was a Canadian Korean War veteran who suggested the idea of countries simultaneously paying tribute to the soldiers who lay in the world's only UN memorial cemetery. Now, the Minister of Patriots and Veterans Affairs started celebrating November 11th 7 years ago and aims to bring in more remains of the Korean War fallen to commemorate their sacrifices. Reporting live from the UN Memorial Cemetery in Busan, this has been Connie Kim.
Another shot at resolving a decades-old issue between Korea and Japan in vain. The neighboring countries held the 10th round of talks in Seoul today over Tokyo's wartime sex slavery system. The negotiations came just days after the first summit between President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, during which the two leaders agreed to speed up the talks. Our foreign affairs correspondent Song Ji-sun is live in the studio with me to delve into what was discussed behind closed doors. Ji-sun, good to have you here.
Right, but at least they tried, and their talks, which continued for 2 hours, went into an hour lunch, and they both said they tried to narrow their gaps to actually reach an agreement as soon as possible. Now, this comes just a week after a summit talks a week before, early in November, where President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe agreed to settle this issue as soon as possible for a faster resolution.
Now, this is the 10th round of negotiation talks after the first one in April last year. Now, what's the biggest difference in opinion regarding this matter of a wartime sexual slavery system?
Well, there's a parallel between Tokyo and Seoul because Tokyo claims that its legal obligations have been completely and finally settled in a 1965 agreement that normalized relations between the two countries. Now, Seoul, however, rebuts this by arguing the so-called conflict one issue was not included in that treaty. And Seoul's foreign ministry also stresses that that agreement only mentioned economic cooperation, property, and claims, while leaving out the illegal act against humanity, and which was the enslavement and exploitation of women during the and before the World War II. So I did look up what was this article about on this 1965 agreement. It is stated, settlement regarding property and claims, which basically means Japan agreed to provide Korea a total of $800 million in the form of loans, grants, and aid as an economic cooperation. In no phrase, it cites compensation for the wartime sex slaves.
Well, Ji-sun, 50 years have passed, more than 50 years, in fact, since this treaty of normalization of relations between the two countries. And now only, I believe, 47 among the hundreds of thousands of women who were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military remain alive. Now, we believe that this apology is not only long overdue, but not enough.
Right, there are a couple of things that victims actually want, and they demand Tokyo to issue a formal unofficial apology so that they can recover their dignity. And considering that the average age of the surviving victims is now 89, time is ticking out.
The Japanese government must legally apologize and recover our honor. That is what we are fighting for. We are continuing our struggle because Tokyo is denying to admit what they have done.
Jisun, what is Tokyo's stance on this?
Well, the key issue here is whether the Japanese government will accept and admit its legal liabilities and take a formal action towards those their responsibilities. But it's likely they will not take that road and do not embrace those responsibilities and take a listen for this expert.
Prime Minister Abe has maintained consistently its original position, which is that Japan's government is only open to considering non-political, humanitarian-based assistance and signs of sympathy toward the victims.
So what it lacks is a government's acknowledgement, official acknowledgement of its wrongdoing. So Jisun, can we expect a deal by the end of this year?
That is the proposed by President Park Geun-hye before the summit talks, but we can't be really sure because it's a 10th round of talks and there are more to come. This is held on a bi-monthly basis, Seoul and Tokyo back to back. But actually, we really have to wait and see whether they can narrow their differences to actually seal the deal. And of course, the summit between President Park Geun-hye and Abe has definitely expedited the process, and it could get another boost if they meet again in the multilateral talks, for example, G20 summit that will kick off in Turkey this weekend, and they will actually try to further arrange details on reaching an agreement as well.
Right, and it seems that the opinion that this deal will not be sealed by the end of this year is prevalent among experts. So take a listen to this expert.
Although we don't have much time left to resolve the issue within this year, as both leaders have promised, there is a possibility of progress toward narrowing differences and discussing further details on the comfort women issue between Korea and Japan. But I think it might be difficult to fully resolve the issue within this year.
Well, Jisun, considering the quickly dwindling number of these victims who remain alive and their age, this seems like this is a very urgent matter that needs to transcend any political or any other interest for that matter.
Right, it actually affected more than 200,000 women during the wartime, and only 47 are alive just here in Korea. And of course, even Tokyo wants this to be settled and concluded quickly. They want their future generation not to be affected by this past atrocities. So it should be on a cooperation relative. Two countries should work together to actually settle this issue as soon as possible.
All right, Jisun, thank you so much for that report.
Thank you.
Voting results for Myanmar's general election are being unveiled for the three straight day. A landslide victory for Aung San Suu Kyi's party seems inevitable. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the latest on the historic developments happening over in Myanmar.
Myanmar's current opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi has won her own seat in the country's parliament with nearly 55,000 votes, according to the country's election commission. As the election results continue to show a landslide win, she sent letters to the military, President Thein Sein, and Speaker of Parliament requesting meetings next week. In response, President Sein congratulated Suu Kyi and agreed to meet her for a peaceful power transfer. Suu Kyi is expected to return to the Koma constituency in Yangon, though she's barred from becoming president due to a constitutional mandate drafted by the country's military rulers, prohibiting anyone with foreign family members assuming the top office. But she said this won't stop her from making all the decisions as leader of the winning party.
And if this constitution doesn't allow it, then we'll have to make arrangements so that we can proceed along usual democratic lines. And the president will be one whom we will choose just in order to meet the requirements of the constitution.
Her National League for Democracy party is heading toward a landslide victory. The Election Commission says the party won over 90% of seats as of Tuesday afternoon local time. The NLD won the last national election in 1990, but military rulers annulled the results and kept Suu Kyi under house arrest for nearly 2 decades. Suu Kyi quickly became an internationally recognized symbol of democracy, which helped her win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
There has been a sharp rise in the number of debt-ridden companies in this country. To save these firms from collapsing altogether, the Korean government will offer restructuring for these 175 small and medium enterprises. This is the highest number of distressed companies since the global financial crisis in 2009. For more, here's our Won Ji-hyun.
On Wednesday, Korea's financial watchdog said it has chosen 175 small and mid-sized companies to undergo restructuring this year. This was 50 more than last year. The Financial Supervisory Service attributes the sharp increase to slowing demand both domestic and from abroad, as well as stricter criteria for credit risk assessment. Out of the 175 companies chosen, 70 were given a C rating, which means they're subject to a mandatory debt workout plan. And the remaining 105 received a D rating, meaning it's now impossible to normalize their business. The list also showed that the manufacturing sector suffered the most, with 105 of them making the list.
The manufacturing industry saw an overall slump this year, which puts a lot of damage on other sectors like electronics, machinery, automobiles, and food.
The financial watchdog says local banks have already given about $1.9 billion worth of loans for the indebted firms. They still have to provide another $390 million of allowance to help those companies stay afloat. To speed up the restructuring process, the government asked the United Asset Management Company, Korea's largest buyer of bad debts, to take charge. It will serve as the parent company for private equity funds that will raise funds to help out those troubled companies get back on track. Won Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
The number of consumers in Korea who have joined a class action lawsuit against Volkswagen for the emissions rigging scandal has now topped 1,500. This is further bad news for Volkswagen as well as for Korea's import car industry as a whole, as latest sales figures show a significant drop while promotions are in overdrive to reverse flagging sales. Our Kwon Jang-ho brings us this report.
There are now over 1,500 Volkswagen drivers in Korea that are pursuing lawsuits on the German auto giant for the cheat software in their diesel engines. That number is expected to mushroom in the coming weeks, as Parun, the law firm representing the clients, have said it has received over 6,000 petitions so far. The plaintiffs are each seeking a full refund, plus compensation for losses of at least $26,000. Volkswagen is not the only German carmaker in trouble. BMW Korea apologized on Wednesday for 7 of its cars that caught fire in the last 2 months. A spokesperson for the company said they are investigating the matter, but whether the fires are isolated incidents or a technical fault is yet to be determined. These issues are affecting sales of imported cars in Korea. The number of newly registered imported cars fell by almost 15% in October compared to the previous month, with Volkswagen sales being the hardest hit, falling almost 70%. BMW sales have also seen a decline of 10%. Until the recent scandals, imported car sales had been soaring, up almost 23% in 2015 compared to last year. To tackle the falling sales, import car dealers in Korea have recurred to a number of promotions for November. Volkswagen, for instance, is offering 60 months of interest-free split payments on 17 car models, as well as further discounts for cash sales. With the number of lawsuits against Volkswagen expected to grow, a government investigation into the emissions scandal to conclude later this month, and global recalls to begin next year, it remains to be seen if such promotion will be able to counter the ongoing negative publicity of the German automaker. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
It is Singles' Day in China. In other words, the biggest online shopping day in the world. Thousands of Chinese online consumers are clicking away before the day is up, and this is prompting Korean exporters to customize marketing strategies, at least for today, for the Chinese local market. Our Shin Se-min has this report.
It was an impressive start. E-commerce giant Alibaba Group logged over $3.9 billion in the first hour of China's Singles' Day. And the mega retailer's total gross merchandise volume keeps on climbing as the 24-hour deadline approaches. November 11th, 11/11 started out as an obscure event in the 1990s, where the country's bachelors and the bachelorettes celebrated being single. But in 2009, Alibaba turned it into an e-commerce phenomenon, with sales reaching nearly $9 billion last year, all through online shopping. It's much like the US Cyber Monday or Black Friday, except the size of Singles' Day sales is 4 times that of Cyber Monday. On this day last year, Alibaba raked in total sales worth over 10 trillion won, or $8.6 billion, which is 100 times more than what all Korean online retailers combined have made in China in the past 5 years.
China's online retail market only takes up 10% of the entire domestic market, a minimal portion for now. But the speed of growth is so fast, it's hard to predict.
Ranging from electronic goods to clothing, the sales event also brings in over 5,000 overseas brands from 25 countries, including Korea, US, and Japan. It's one of the better ways to publicize Korean brands to some 20% of the world's entire population online during a 24-hour window.
In order to turn this mega sales event into a long-term opportunity, local exporters need to better come up with marketing tactics targeting specific age groups, mostly those in their 20s and 30s, and particular regions.
With China rebalancing its economy to one based on consumer spending following its slowing economic growth, it's become much clear that Korean exporters mulling over options to restructure their export strategies should put heavier emphasis on shipping consumer goods to China. 신세민, Arirang News. Hands down, it was once the nation's most popular food. Today, not so much. Asia is losing some of its appetite for rice in favor of wheat, but that trend is nowhere else more pronounced than Korea, where bread and pastries have become a new staple. Now, this change in appetite, coupled with other factors, is leading the nation's rice stockpiles to grow each year. Our Lee Ji-won takes a look at this increasing problem of just too much rice.
Insadong, a tourist neighborhood best offering traditional Korea, is hosting an event to celebrate Karetok Day. Through events related to karetok, the government is seeking to change people's perceptions on the rice for the better, meanwhile boosting consumption.
The event is to promote rice consumption to help farmers and also increase people's awareness of healthy diets.
The long shape of karetok symbolizes longevity and is often enjoyed by people during holidays. Dishes made from karetok were prepared today to enticed the taste buds of passerby.
Is this good? Yes.
Do you like it?
Yes. Very good with onions.
I only saw karetok when I was younger, and seeing it again makes me think of old times.
This is the 10th Karetok Day, and there is a special reason to why it's held alongside Farmers' Day. Traditionally, Koreans' main staple used to be rice, but the rice consumption in today's society has decreased dramatically.
I'm on a diet, so I try not to eat too much rice.
There are many other things to eat other than rice like bread, so I don't eat a lot of rice.
As rice consumption continues to fall, rice stockpiled at the end of this year is expected to reach 1.32 million tons at a cost of roughly $346 million for storage. During the 1994 Uruguay round, Korea agreed to postpone levying tariffs on rice in exchange for importing a certain amount of rice, which is the currently set 400,000 tons. This accounts for 9% of the total rice consumption in Korea. This agreement also significantly contributes to the current rice glut. From the parliament to people of all strata in society, everyone has something to say when it comes to proposing solutions to this problem. But a general consensus is hard to reach.
Rice is what we eat. We should not throw food out into the ocean.
I hope the government quickly comes up with whatever measure is needed to solve the rice surplus problem.
It would be nice to send it to North Korea or use it for animal feed, but it is our main staple and people should eat more rice. Rice is the most important food source of our country.
With no clear answer, many are turning to processed foods made of rice as a solution. People are using milled rice flour instead of regular wheat flour to make cakes and desserts, which appeal to the palate of the younger generation.
We must stop thinking that rice is a meal. Because of the changes to the population pyramid, rice consumption is expected to continue to decrease. But changes in lifestyle show that trend may be countered through the use of rice in processed foods, which will increase consumption.
The government said it will announce a mid to long-term solution for falling rice prices and rising stockpiles by the end of this year. Many, especially farmers, are sincerely hoping for an answer.
If the government and people do not show interest and support for the local agriculture, I feel there is no longer hope.
이지원, 아리랑 뉴스.
In the U.S., Republican candidates clashed Tuesday in a debate focused on the economy. Bruce Harrison joins me live in the studio. Bruce, even after 4 debates, it seems that it's still unclear which one will be the Republican candidate.
Conn-young, hello. This field of candidates is just as jumbled as ever. Billionaire businessman Donald Trump and retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson have been leading polls for a while, but they've been taking a beating in the media and on stage lately. So that's allowed some other candidates to step up, which was pretty evident last night.
So, Bruce, who would you say was the winner from the debate?
Senators Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio shined just like they did in the 3rd debate, but former Florida Governor Jeb Bush is getting a lot of praise for his performance after all but disappearing from the race. Now, Bush struggled in 3 previous debates, but got the crowd excited Tuesday night. Trump said it'd be all right if Russian President Vladimir Putin takes out Islamic State militants in Syria and Iraq. Bush jumped right in, comparing Trump's view on the civil war in Syria to a board game. Bush said the U.S. isn't going to police the world, but it better be the world's leader. After 2 strong debate performances, Senator Marco Rubio may be in the best position to challenge Trump and Carson. The young senator was criticized on stage for plans to increase defense spending, but the crowd erupted when he responded by promising to do what it takes to protect U.S. national security. Rubio and Senator Ted Cruz both scored the highest as well in social media sentiment. The U.S. government's introduced a new cap on how much sugar people should consume in a day. If you had a can of Coke today, you've already reached the limit. Son Jung-in reports.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has released a new set of guidelines that recommend a daily cap on the amount of sugar people should consume. According to the New York Times, the FDA has set new guidelines that recommend people limit their added sugar to no more than 10% of their daily calories. For anyone older than 3, that means eating fewer than 12.5 teaspoons or 50 grams of sugar a day. Children between the ages of 1 and 3 should not consume more than 25 grams. Some people may decide to cut back on their sugar intake by giving up soft drinks. A regular-sized can of Coke already has the maximum recommended amount of sugar. But health experts say that's not enough because sweeteners lurk in less obvious foods like low-fat yogurt, salad dressings, and even whole-grain bread. That's why the FDA is also pushing to require that all packaged food indicate the amount of added sugar on their nutrition label so consumers can distinguish between the amount of natural sugar and added sugar. Currently, nutrition labels in the U.S. reveal only the total amount of carbohydrates in a product. This is the strongest step the FDA has taken to curtail sugar consumption so far, but other health organizations had already taken the lead. In March, the World Health Organization dropped its sugar intake recommendations from 10% of daily calories to 5%. The American Heart Association also recommends stricter sugar limits, calling for women to limit themselves to 6 teaspoons of sugar a day and about 9 teaspoons for men. 손정인, 아리랑 뉴스.
Well, scientists are developing a robot dog, but Bruce, this is nothing like one of those plastic ones for kids, right?
Nothing you'd find at your home. No, this one has a specific scientific purpose.
Right, and it's supposed to be able to operate like a real human being?
The developers hope in time it'll be able to do things like jump over and avoid obstacles. Now, most importantly, it would be able to do this in place of people in dangerous situations. Researchers hope to send HYQ, that's the robot dog's name, on search and rescue missions and to environmental disasters.
And that's our research interest in this machine, that we have a machine that can go out there and work in environments that are not known to the robot and do this robustly, so that eventually we can use these robots to do something useful.
The robot was developed at the Italian Institute of Technology in Genoa, and now a team at ETH Zurich is developing algorithms to maximize its full potential.
Well, Korea's KAIST has got its very own Hubo, which is also a very advanced robotics that we should talk about at a future broadcast.
Sure, of course, yeah. All these robots that are being developed, multi-purpose, and really can help humans out in the long run.
Right, just for good purposes. I don't want robots taking over the world, but...
Not anytime soon.
All right, well, Bruce, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Conn-young.
It's time to get a weather update with Jian at the Weather Center. Jian.
Hello, Conn-young. While the capital area enjoyed good air quality, an ultra-fine dust advisory was in place in Gwangju as well as the Jeollado provinces till 2 p.m. this afternoon. But now, smog and dust have dissipated.
That's perfect news. Now, tomorrow is the day of the 2016 National College Entrance Exam. It's a big day here in Korea, and the weather will be generous for the test takers, right?
That's right, but the morning lows will kick off in the single digits, so bundle up. But daily highs will peak to 18, which is about 5 degrees higher than the average. And people in the west coast and inland regions, you'll need to watch out for morning fog once again, but partly sunny skies will dominate the day for most parts, while regions in Gangwon-do province will see light rain during the day, and Jeju Island will receive late night showers. On that note, here are the readings for tomorrow. While daily high here in the capital peak at 18, Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 17 and 20. Now, as for the other regions, Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 18 and 19. Now that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world. But before going over to the weather conditions around the world, Friday we have rain in the forecast for the Friday evening, which is likely to linger till Saturday morning. Now that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that is our broadcast on this Wednesday evening. I'm Moon Conn-young. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you right back here same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.